Title: The Art of Revenge, Part 1. James had always believed in love. He was the kind of man who held doors open, left handwritten notes for his wife, and cherished every moment he spent with her. For 10 years, he had devoted himself to Sarah, a woman he considered the love of his life. Their marriage was, to him, a sanctuary until the day he uncovered the truth. It started with small things. A whisper of perfume on her clothes that wasn't hers, late-night text messages she brushed off as just work, and the growing emotional distance between them. James wasn't the paranoid type, but when doubt crept in, it clung to him like a shadow. One evening, curiosity got the best of him. Sarah had left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. A single message popped up. "I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again." His hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages. The evidence was there. Months of sweet nothings, secret meetings, and a name: Daniel. His heart pounded, not with sadness, but with an unfamiliar coldness. Betrayal was a knife he hadn't expected to taste, and yet here he was, choking on its bitterness. James closed the phone carefully, making sure everything was as it was before. He sat in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the marble countertop, his mind racing. Confronting Sarah immediately would be foolish. She would deny everything, twist the truth, and make him the villain. No, this required patience. If she wanted deception, he would show her how it was truly done. The following days were agonizing. James observed Sarah with fresh eyes. Every kiss she gave him felt like a lie, every smile a mask. He noticed how often she checked her phone, how she disappeared for hours under the pretense of work, how she avoided intimacy with him. The realization that the woman he loved was leading a double life crushed him. But instead of falling apart, he steeled himself. James needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. Hiring a private investigator seemed extreme, but it was necessary. He contacted Robert, a man recommended by a friend who had been through a similar betrayal. Within days, Robert provided him with everything: photos of Sarah and Daniel meeting at a hotel, timestamps of their calls, receipts from expensive dinners James hadn't been invited to. Looking at the pictures, James felt something shift inside him. He no longer saw Sarah as the woman he had married. She was a stranger, a liar, a betrayer, and she deserved to pay for what she had done. But revenge required patience. He couldn't simply confront her, not yet. That would be too easy, too merciful. No, he needed something grand, something that would leave a lasting scar on her perfect little world. James started planning. He visited their bank, making discreet adjustments to their joint accounts. He met with a lawyer, ensuring that when the time came, Sarah would be left with nothing. He transferred assets, secured his finances, and prepared for the inevitable storm. All the while, he played the role of the loving husband. He kissed Sarah goodbye in the morning, asked about her day, and even suggested a weekend getaway. She declined, of course, claiming work obligations. James merely nodded, pretending to be disappointed, while inside, he was counting down the days. The perfect moment would come soon, and when it did, Sarah wouldn't know what hit her. Title: The Art of Revenge, Part 2. The plan was set in motion. James had always been meticulous, but now his attention to detail became razor sharp. Every move Sarah made, every lie she told, every moment she spent with Daniel only fueled his resolve. He would not simply expose her. He would dismantle the illusion of her perfect life, piece by piece. James began by subtly withdrawing from their marriage. He no longer initiated conversations, no longer reached for her hand absent-mindedly, no longer looked at her with admiration. Sarah, too caught up in her affair, barely noticed. If she did, she likely assumed he was growing distant due to work stress or some other benign reason. It was perfect. She had no idea that every step she took was leading her toward ruin. He started hosting small gatherings with mutual friends, reinforcing his image as a devoted, loving husband. He spoke about their future, about potential vacations, about how much he cherished his wife. He wanted Sarah to be lulled into a false sense of security, to believe that even if he had suspicions, he was still too blind with love to act on them. Meanwhile, James continued working with his lawyer, ensuring that when the time came, Sarah would be financially devastated. He found every legal loophole possible to protect his assets. The house, the savings, the investments, everything would be his. Sarah would be left with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. Then came the final stage of his plan. James arranged an elaborate anniversary celebration, inviting their closest friends and family. Sarah, unaware of his true intentions, played the part of the doting wife. She smiled, laughed, and placed affectionate hands on his arm, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. As the evening progressed, James stood before their guests, a glass of champagne in hand. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady, "I want to celebrate the woman who has been by my side for 10 years. His words. Sarah beamed, unaware of the malice concealed beneath his words. He gestured to a projector screen that had been set up earlier. "But before we toast, I want to share a little something. A glimpse into the life we've built together." The lights dimmed. The first few images on the screen were innocent, a slideshow of their wedding day, vacations, happy moments. Then, the tone shifted. Photos of Sarah and Daniel appeared, time-stamped and undeniable. Screenshots of text messages followed, their intimate words for all to see. A collective gasp spread through the room as the realization set in. Sarah's smile faltered. Her hands began to tremble. She turned to James, eyes wide with horror. "James, Save it," he cut her off, his voice sharp. "I just thought you'd like to know how much I appreciate your devotion." The room fell into stunned silence. Whispers buzzed through the crowd. Sarah, humiliated and exposed, looked around desperately, as if seeking refuge. But there was none. Even Daniel, her so-called lover, had the good sense to slip out unnoticed, unwilling to face the fallout. James set his glass down and placed a folder in front of her. "Divorce papers. Everything has already been taken care of. You'll find you have nothing left to fight for." Sarah's breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes, but James felt nothing. The woman he had once loved was a stranger now, and this stranger had no place in his life. He turned to the guests, raising his glass. "To new beginnings." The crowd, still in shock, hesitated before lifting their own glasses in response. The celebration was no longer about their anniversary. It was about the end of an era, and James had ensured that Sarah would never forget it. Title: The Art of Revenge, Part 3. The fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah's carefully curated world crumbled in an instant. Friends she once counted on now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Her family, humiliated and disappointed, barely spoke to her. And Daniel, the man she had risked everything for, vanished without a trace, unwilling to stand by her when it truly mattered. James, on the other hand, thrived. He found solace in the quiet aftermath, knowing he had executed his revenge flawlessly. But there was still one final touch left to complete the masterpiece of his vengeance. Sarah, now living in a small, barely furnished apartment, was struggling to rebuild. James had ensured she walked away with nothing, not the house, not the savings, not the comfort of the life she had once known. And now, it was time for his final act of closure. One evening, Sarah received a letter. The envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably James's. With shaking hands, she opened it and read, "Sarah, you once told me that love is built on trust, that trust is the foundation of everything. You were right, and now you have neither. I hope Daniel was worth it, though I doubt he was, considering how quickly he abandoned you. You made your choices, and now you live with them. This letter is not an attempt to wound you further. You have done enough damage on your own. It is simply a farewell. The last piece of the puzzle, the final nail in the coffin of what we once had. I do not hate you, Sarah. You are simply a lesson I will never forget. Goodbye, James." Sarah let the letter fall from her trembling fingers. Tears streamed down her face, not just from sorrow, but from the sheer weight of regret. She had gambled everything, believing she could have it all, and instead, she had lost more than she ever imagined. James, however, never looked back. His heart, once broken, had hardened into something stronger. He had won not just against Sarah, but against the pain she had inflicted. And so, with a final deep breath, James stepped into the future, leaving the past behind him exactly where it belonged.